Well, good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take for Market Rebellion on this Thursday morning. And what a beautiful morning we've got in front of us right now. Started off a little bit murky here in terms of weather. It's starting to clear up a little bit here. But speaking of murky, if you look at this past week, it sure has been interesting. Looking at Tuesday, and now obviously the long holiday weekend, that we all are fully know. But when we look back to Tuesday, we had volatility, and we were talking about that volatility on that day being in a pretty interesting range from 30 and a half, got up to 36. It hit those 36 levels very early in the session. This is going back to Tuesday. And then despite the fact that the markets continue to accelerate and continue to move to the downside, volatility just continued on its way to the downside as well, actually finishing near 31, near the lows of the day, actually. So that was something that I think really did stand out. Now, yesterday, you look over at the volatility and it's traded between 28 and a half and call it 31 and a half. And as I said, we were up at 36 just the day before in the early morning hours. And yet we just didn't hold on to that volatility. Seemed to be a bit of a sign. Well, yesterday morning, we started out the day. We were actually in the pre-market. We were up about 40 points or so. Dow up about 250, 300. The NASDAQ bouncing pretty nice, somewhere between 145, 185. By the time we got to the middle of the afternoon, we started to see the S&P up more than 80 points. We saw the Dow up over 600 plus points and the NASDAQ up over 300 points. It really was in the last 30 minutes where we got a bit of a sell-off actually yesterday. Across those major indices up around 2.5% or so. Started to give a little bit of that back. As a matter of fact, S&P finished up the day up still strong, up 67 points, but well off of the highs. And the Dow sort of a similar path where it finished up still 440 points or so, and the NASDAQ up still close to 300 points. So holding on, but a little bit of a sell-off as we saw the last 30 minutes of the session really started to push on markets. Yet volatility just continued to be a little bit lower and a little bit lower and closing near the lows of the day underneath 29. So that was something that definitely stood out. Now, Tuesday we talked about huge volumes. And again, over 34 million contracts. But this has been becoming something of more normal than abnormal. As a matter of fact, yesterday, a little bit on more of the abnormal side, we did exceed 30 million, but just barely. We traded about 30.5 million contracts yesterday. So again, over 30 million. It's been very, very strong. We had that day where we were 45 plus million. So we know that there's volumes out there. We know there's huge participation. And certainly we also understand how the options world works, the derivatives world. It does provide leverage. It does give everybody an opportunity for some sort of participation. And certainly we have seen that throughout 2020. This is not something that just started in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or this past month. This is something that's been going on in all of 2020, and particularly, obviously, through this entire pandemic as you go back to the early parts of March. So all kinds of different stuff moving all over the place yesterday. But when we look at those volumes, and I talked about it being about 30.5 million, there were 4 stocks that actually contributed about 4 million contracts of that 30 million that was trading yesterday. Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, those were the big 3 that really participated. And actually, it was just those 3 were 4 million alone. And then you could add the next level. We had a couple other names that were definitely getting some huge volumes. As a matter of fact, throw out Zoom, Neo, American Airlines, you had Work, you had AMD, you had Facebook, you had Bank of America. Just an amazing number of options being traded across all of those various names. Those big 3, maybe we could even add in a 4th or so, really were a major contributor to the major volumes that we were seeing as we talk about that 30 plus million. Now, look over at technology, up about 3% yesterday. The XLK definitely indicating a lot of those various names that we talk about all the time, but it was more than that. It wasn't just a technology rally. We had the industrials up about 1.5% with Caterpillar and Dow. We had the consumers up of almost 2% with Amazon and Home Depot and Lowe's and those kind of names. We had healthcare up about 1.5% as well. J&J, Merck, definitely participants. Matter of fact, seeing some call buying yesterday in Merck as well. The one lagger yesterday that did stand out was Lululemon. Now, that's a stock that was just trading $400 on August 3rd. And here we are pulling back, and then a drop of about 7.5%, despite the fact they beat on earnings, they beat on revenue. Their online was up 150%. And that acquisition of Mirror, and they talked about how that was going to start contributing as well. However, all of that being said, the problem was they had a little bit of that cautionary sort of a sound to them in terms of cautionary but optimistic for the second half of the year. That was something that was not accepted very well. That puts a little bit more pressure on the stock, and that's why it was down a little bit more yesterday. Now, is it absolutely been getting punished? We didn't see a lot of call buying that really would institute maybe the idea of, all right, well, maybe this is just enough. But this has been a name that's been a great contributor. It's still had an unbelievable year. And I will point out, take a look at the performance this year, Nike versus Lulu. You'll see what I'm talking about, and you'll understand why I still remain a pretty big fan of this name in terms of where they are and where they are in terms of the first half of the year and where they may go in the second half of the year, particularly if we continue to have so much more that's going to be remote. That certainly doesn't hurt. That certainly would help as well. So all of that set up. We had the big down day, had the big up day. We gave up some of that late in the day. Well, early on here, in the pre-market, we had S&P up about 0.5%. We had the Dow up just a little bit, about 0.25%. NASDAQ up nearly 1%. That sort of flipped around a little bit. We had the Dow now has jumped up pretty nicely. It's up nearly, well, it's over 0.5%, but it's up 170 points so far. NASDAQ up about 150 points so far. So that's a little over 1.3% right now. And the S&P up about 0.75%, trading around 25. The volatility index, yes, that's pulled back as well. That's sitting right around 28, and it's down again. So getting pushed around a little bit on that volatility index, but what a great indicator that's been. Despite the fact on Tuesday, that big push to the downside and that continued acceleration, we talked about it and we looked at that volatility index in terms of just kind of easing back throughout the session, really giving you a sense of the not looking for any kind of panic was what exactly the interpretation seemed to be telling us. And right now that seems to be playing out rather nicely as we have another second day of a rally that's pushing off of those lows that we hit just the other day. So what's driving the Dow right now? A lot of the names are technology names. You've got Salesforce, new name to the Dow. You got Apple, you got Microsoft, you got Cisco, you got IBM, those kind of names. So certainly that is the driving force. But you've got other names that are really participating as well, like Disney and Nike. So it's not just the technology names. Matter of fact, when you're looking at what's driving the NASDAQ right now, Tesla, Adobe, Zoom, NVIDIA, Workday, we've got Wynn, Marriott, those kind of names. You also have the cruise lines that are definitely on a nice participation today, whether it's the S&P or the NASDAQ, wherever you want to look. Look over at these chips, up about 1.5% on the SMH. Quarvo, another one of those names that's been participating as well. And then we've got movers all over the place. Lulu, I just talked about that. That's bouncing a little bit today pretty nicely. You've got DraftKings as well. Obviously, NFL season starts tonight. Everybody's excited about that. Kansas City Chiefs. You've got Ulta, you got Disney, as I mentioned, you got JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Citi, all moving to the upside, all with a nice strong move. So a nice broad participation today. We've got financials. We've also got some industrial participation. And obviously, we've got some of the consumer participation as well. So a lot of that actually feeding into where we are and what I was just reading off, which is about the same right now as it was in terms of that lift that we're seeing, at least early on. We're only 45 minutes into the first the trading session of the day. So now, unusual option activity. Love to hit this because, boy, it has been so on. It's been amazing. Even if you go back to Tuesday, there was so much call buying, put selling, all of that being bullish into that push to the downside that absolutely reacted very nicely yesterday, and we're seeing even a nicer reaction that continues on today. So a lot of the activity that we were seeing in the options world really give us some great indicators. Now, yesterday we talked about, or the other day we were talking about Zoom. That certainly paid off pretty quickly. That was great. And we've had some of the other names as well. So today I'm going to give you Melco. So I mentioned Wynn as one of those names that's in the NASDAQ that's having a pretty nice day. Melco, Chinese, you got the casino resort whole thing and competition there. It hit with two separate hits today. That's really was something that was definitely unusual, kind of back to back. So pretty aggressive. Now, one of those was buying about 6,000 of the November 20. Stock was trading, let's call it around 1880 for both of these trades. So beneath 19, buying the November 20s for about $1.75. So just out of the money call, but buying a little bit of time going out to November. I got a second one, 6,500 of the October 22 calls. So you're going up a little bit and shortening the time, and yet those are only 35 cents because of those factors. But about 6,000 of the first one, about 6,500 of the second one gives you a little idea of what people are looking at right now. And so that's some pretty heavy volume. We've seen this name many, many times in the past. Haven't seen it that much recently. We've seen other names definitely in that world, whether you want to call it the betting world, the casino world. Certainly we've had Penn Gaming. We've had great runs in there. We've had DraftKings as well. We've had great runs in there. So there has been some participation there. We've seen a little bit less out of the major casinos, but we've seen those as well. MGM, Wynn, Las Vegas Sands, certainly all those names. Melco, we hadn't seen as much, but it's definitely a name that does hit on the unusual options activity on a fairly regular basis. Why are we seeing a little bit of that lift, I think, in some of these names? The NFL season. It's kicking off. And what's going to be going on? College football's already started, but is there something more to come in college football? That's going to be exciting, too, to watch, because certainly a lot of this absolutely impacts a lot of the names that we were just talking about in the casino world and the gambling space. Certainly in terms of volume and everything else, that would be contributors. There's no doubt about that. Guys, I got to get it to you one more time. My wife and I are very, very excited. We've got Twin Cities Lime. Go to twincitieslime.org. That's our third gala. It's going to be virtual. It's Saturday the 12th, 7 to 8. Just taking up 1 hour of your time. Just take a look. If you go to twincitieslime.org and then go to the events page and then view details underneath the 2020 gala, you'll actually be able to scroll all the way down. You'll see what the event's going to be looking like, and you're going to see a lot of the live auctions that are still, they started already. They are items that can be bid on right now and will go all the way up into the end of the gala itself. So that should be pretty exciting. That we're really looking forward to. It's really meaningful to us. Hopefully you can be participate in that. It's going to be great. It's something where there's a lot of wonderful things going on. We're trying to help people as much as we can. And obviously, the more money we can get in through donations, the more opportunity it is to get people to a Lyme literate practitioner so they can absolutely get diagnosed and understand what's been going on. It's a terrible disease. As I mentioned before, my wife, 16 years undiagnosed. That's awful. That's something that should not happen in this day and age. In healthcare, it still happens. And a lot of folks continue to come at us that have said, look, this has been going on for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is, or maybe it's even something new. If you can attack it early, you can actually have a much better opportunity to live a much more normal life, which is what everybody would like to have. So, twincitieslime.org, check it out, go to the events page. Guys, have a great day of trading. It's going to be so much fun. Talked about some of these different options. If anything's a little bit confusing for you, make sure you understand what you're doing before you hop in. You got to get to the guys that can educate you the very best. That's here at the Market Rebellion. It really matters to us that you have a better experience or the best experience possible. And the only way you can do that is with an education. So do your best to understand what we're talking about. But if you don't, then get educated, because it's going to be very, very important. It's going to be something that's very meaningful to give you a much better opportunity for success. Have a great day of trading.